Um, Hello, today is Friday, June 13th. Welcome to episode 464 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vina, and I'm joined today by Deputy Executive Director Martha Miller, Advisory Board Member Lester Munson, and fellow Jessica Jones. All right, y'all. So in the early morning hours, local time, Israel launched Rising Lion, a massive military operation against the Iranian regime, targeting its nuclear facilities, military infrastructure, including long-range missile facilities and air defenses, as well as the senior leadership of the IRGC. Confirmed kills include Hossein Salami, the commander of the IRGC, the majority of the senior leadership of the IRGC's Air Force, and several nuclear scientists. Maybe more coming, so stand by. According to Israeli media, Iran had attained all the components necessary to assemble 15 bombs. This comes after the United States pulled U.S. personnel from parts of the Middle East, suggesting that the Israelis had notified the Trump administration that this operation was coming. In response, President Trump lamented that he gave Iran a chance to make a deal with respect to the Iranian nuclear program, and that it would be much worse if they didn't take it. He then went on to say that certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. He then ended his statement saying that it is still not too late for Iran to take the deal. Secretary of State Marco Rubio disassociated the United States from Israel's operation, characterizing Israel's action as unilateral, and that we're not involved in the strikes, and that the administration was prioritizing the safety and security of U.S. personnel in the region. Before we get into this conversation, I just want to offer a disclaimer that this operation is ongoing. It is not over, and there is still a lot we don't know. So we expect a lot of information to be coming out later today and the days ahead. So with that, I'm going to turn over to you, Martha. What do we make of this? Is this a preemptive strike? Is this not? I know you have thoughts on this.
I think what I found very interesting is how this is being described as a preemptive strike. Israel has been the target of attacks through a proxy war from Iran for decades. It has, I think October 7th was, the first foray into a new phase of that proxy war. That's where, obviously Hamas committed some of the greatest atrocities against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And, Israel has viewed their situation as really existential. Iran has posed an existential threat to Israel for years. And October 7th, I think, really brought that home in so many ways. And look, this war has always been, this proxy war has always been fueled by Iran. It's been managed and by Iran. So I think Israel is essentially identifying the enemy that they've been facing and taking the war to them. And so I don't agree with this idea of a preemptive strike. Yes, it's preempting nuclear capabilities, but this, in my view, is just the next phase in a war that's already been waged for years.
Jess, what do you make of this? Is the administration's response appropriate? Should we be having Israel's back? It sounds like we're trying to step away from this operation. Can we actually do that?
It seems like, and I say we might have hit an inflection. Let's just now know for those not watching the screen, an inflection point where the administration's kind of bravado and foreign policy by tweets or Truth Social might actually hit a wall, right? Like we see real airstrikes, we see U.S. military families being pulled from the region. Like there are real airstrikes happening, right? So the U.S. is kind of caught off guard, but it's tough talk when it comes to Putin, when it comes to tariffs. Like this is not the time for tough talks, right? There's no more talking. There's real action. And so we might see kind of an end to this foreign policy by social media. And I say maybe though, because, Rubio came out with a statement last night distancing the U.S. from the airstrikes, but President Trump was on Truth Social this morning, trying to bring the Iranians back to the table because he is, from his overtures, more interested in making a deal than getting the U.S. involved in a conflict. He, as we've discussed much here on the show, he's got kind of a split both in his administration when it comes to more of the hawks who want to take action, want to make sure there's no enrichment, there's no nuclear weapons. And those, especially when it comes to his MAGA, some of his voter base that wants the U.S. not involved in conflict, right? America first is what they voted on. And so President Trump is really kind of facing a tightrope right now on what happens next. If the Iranians do strike U.S. targets, or if there are Americans killed, what happens? It's hard to foresee the U.S. not getting directly involved, but what does that do to, the president's voter base? And what does that do to maybe the U.S.-Israel relationship? Obviously, it seems like Israel came in front of the U.S. here. The U.S. had been kind of pressuring the Israelis to wait till negotiations ended before strikes, and that did not happen, which is probably why Rubio did some distancing late last night, early this morning. And I can't imagine, we don't see it, that President Trump is not too happy about being left out of the decision-making. Can be a mercurial, fellow. So, not really sure what's going on in his mind right now. But again, like everything else, like you said, Morgan, this is still really early. Like this just started last night, early hours this morning. So there's still a lot of action that's going to happen. And we're going to have to see, how Iran responds and how the U.S., might need to respond in kind.
Yep. Les, I know you've got thoughts.
I do have thoughts. Thanks, Morgan. Yes. It's not really a fun Friday episode because it's pretty serious. I guess good for Israel. This was the right time to do it. They'd been setting this up for months, if not years. And so this was not an off the top of their head idea. They'd done a good job of destroying Iran's ability to defend itself in the last attack, which I think was in April. So this is kind of the culmination of a lot of activity. We saw what Israel did to Iranian proxy forces, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and even to some extent the Houthis in Yemen. So this is clearly a very serious, comprehensive part of a very serious, comprehensive effort by the Israelis since the October 7th attack. And good for them. I'm a little concerned about the Trump administration response. I think it's a little tone deaf to say it's unilateral and we have nothing to do with it. I understand the president's interest in telling other countries you should do stuff on your own and be strong, and then we'll be there to kind of back you up later. Some of that is fine. Now the fur is flying, though, and we need to kind of be present for our friends in the state of Israel. There's not a real contest here about whose side we're on. The Iranians are the most dangerous threat to our national security interests in the Middle East by far. Israel is doing us a big favor here. We should be a little more forward-leaning about where we're at. And I worry that the administration is starting to look a little bit too much like the Obama administration. The peace talks around the nuclear deal had a lot of similarities to what the Obama administration did. And I'm pretty sure the Trump administration doesn't want to be like the Obama administration. So let's go ahead and say some stuff and position ourselves in a little bit of a stronger position than those guys did, because that was not a sustainable approach to the region or the world.
Yeah, Les, I largely agree with you here in the sense that these are terrifying. Are you sure you want to be associated with this?
Les just gets off and walks off now.
Yeah. Goodbye, I'm done. No, I mean, when it really comes down to it, we knew the Israelis were going to make this decision at some point. It was not an if the Israelis are going to go after try to neutralize. Can I talk today? Neutralize Iran's nuclear weapons program. It was a matter of when it was going to happen. Israel has been saying this for 10 years that if Iran does not dismantle its weapons program, they will take action to defend themselves. And so I think what we've seen here, I think it's actually very interestingly timed. We see the Trump administration talks really start to flounder. They're not really going anywhere. President Trump gives them 60 days, and on day 61, boom, in goes Israel. So I don't think that this was a surprise to the Trump administration. I think if anything, there was probably a lot of coordination going on. The United States was probably very, very clued in to the Israelis' plans. I would like to see the Trump administration be a little bit more forward-leaning in having Israel's back here. I think it was just reported that CNN's Dan Abash just spoke with President Trump last night, and President Trump reiterated his support for Israel. I think that's important. We need to be a lot more forward-leaning on that. And if necessary, we need to provide Israel the support, whether it's intel or military needed to be able to get the job done, because this is not just a threat to Israel, it is a threat to our other allies and partners in the region and to U.S. national security interests. So with that said, I'm sure there will be a lot more to follow here. And I encourage everyone to check back with our team, maybe on Monday. Maybe we'll still be talking about this on Monday. Who knows? But with that said, thank you very much to Claude Jennings, Kelly Crowley, and Taylor Lane and the NSI staff for producing today's episode. Join us on Monday, June 16th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart, fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. Fault Lines is now on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.